botanist, a very prolific writer, and he loved animals, and everything he wrote about, he animated, whether he's talking about the trees or whatever. He made a number of trips to Alaska, and on one of his trips there was a dog that had no particular papers. It was kind of a mixture that belonged to one of the writers along with him, who was actually a missionary. And the name of the dog was Stikine, and he wrote this little book. It was his first and most successful book that he had written. And Stikine is named after the Stikine Indians here of Alaska. So this is a little excerpt here from this story of Stikine. And particularly listen here, the youngsters particularly, how he speaks to the animals almost as if they are human beings. It was a morning that they were going out on the glacier, and it was a very bitter morning, and he didn't like anybody with him because they couldn't keep up with him on his hikes. So listen carefully on how he treats this particular animal. I have never held death in contempt, though in the course of my explorations I have oftentimes felt that to meet one's fate on a noble mountain or in the heart of a glacier would be blessed as compared with death from disease or from some shabby lowland accident. But the best death, quick and crystal pure and set so glaringly openly before us, is hard enough to face, even though we feel gratefully sure that we have already had enough happiness for a dozen lives. But poor Stikine, the wee, hairy, sleeky beastie, think of him when I had decided to dare the bridge. And while I was on my knees, chipping a hollow on the ground above it, he came up behind me, and he pushed past my shoulder, and he looked down here and scanned the sliver and its approaches with his mysterious eyes. And then he looked at me in the face here with a startled look of air and surprise and concern, and he began to mutter and to whine, saying as plainly as if speaking with words, "Surely you are not going into that awful place." This was the first time I had seen him gaze deliberately into a crevice or into my face with an eager, troubled look. That he should have recognized and appreciated the danger at first glance showed wonderful sagacity. Never before had the daring midget seemed to know that ice was slippery or that there was any such thing as danger anywhere. His looks and his tones of his voice when he began to complain and speak his fears were so human that I unconsciously talked to him as I would a frightened boy. And in trying to calm his fears, perhaps I moderated my own. "Oh, hush your fears, my boy," he said. "We will get across safe, though it's not going to be easy. No right way is easy in this world. We must risk our lives to save them, and at worst we can only slip. And how grand a grave we will have, and by our nice bones will do good to the terminal moraine." But my sermon was far from reassuring him, and he began to cry and to mother, and taking another piercing look at the tremendous gulf, he ran away, seeking in desperate excitement some other crossing. By the time he got back, baffled of course, I had made a step or two here, and I dared not look back, but he made himself heard, and when he saw I was certainly bent on crossing, he cried in a loud despair. The danger was enough to daunt anybody, but it seems wonderful that he should have been able to weigh and appreciate it so justly. No mountaineer could have seen it more quickly or judged it more wisely, discriminating between a real and apparent peril. When I gained the other side, he screamed louder than ever, and after running back and forth in a vain search for a way to escape, he returned to the brink of the crevasse and above the bridge, moaning and wailing as if in the bitterness of death. Could this be the silent, philosophic Stikine? I shouted encouragement, telling him the bridge was not as bad as it looked, and if I had left it safe for his feet, then he could walk it easily here. But he was afraid to try. Strange so small an animal should be capable of such big, wide fears. I called again and again in reassuring tones, "Come on," and to fear nothing. He could come if he would only try. He would hush for a moment, then look down again at the bridge and shout in his unshakable conviction, conviction that he could never, never come that way here. And his natural composure and courage had vanished utterly in a tumultuous storm of fear. Had the danger been less, his distress would have been ridiculous. But in this dismal, merciless abyss lay the shadow of death, and his heart-rending cries might well have called for heaven to his help, and perhaps they did. So hidden before, he was now transparent, and one could see the workings of his heart and mind like the movements of a clock out of its case. His voice, his gestures, his hopes here, and his fears were so perfectly human that none could mistake them. And while he seemed to understand every word of mine, I was troubled at the thought of having to leave him out all night and the danger of not finding him the following morning. But it seemed impossible to get him to venture, to compel him to try here through the fear of being abandoned. I started off and leaving him to his fate and disappeared behind a hummock here. But this did no good. He only lay down and he moaned in utter hopeless misery. So after hiding for a few minutes, I went back to the brink of the crevasse and in a severe tone of voice shouted across him that I must certainly now leave him. I could wait no longer, that if he would not come, all I could promise was to return to seek him the following day. I warned him that if he went back to the woods, the wolves would kill him, and finished by urging him once more by words to come on and come on. He knew very well here what I meant, and at last with the courage and despair and hushed and breathless, he crouched down into the brink of the hollow I had made for my need, and he pressed his body here against the ice of his trying to get advantage here of every hair, and he gazed in the first step, and he put his little feet together and slid them slowly, slowly over the edge and down into it, bunching all four in it, almost standing on his head, and then out without lifting his feet, as well as I could see through the snow, he slowly worked them down into step after step in succession here in the same way, and he gained the edge of the bridge. And then lifting his feet with the regularities and slowness of the vibrations of a second's pendulum, as if counting and measuring 1, 2, 3, and holding himself steady against the gusty wind and giving separate attention to each step, he gained the foot of the cliff. And while I was on my knees leaning over to give him a lift should he succeed in getting within reach of my arm, here he halted in dead silence, and it was here that I feared that he might fall, for dogs are poor climbers. I had no cord. If I had one, I would have dropped a noose over his head and hauled him up. But while I was thinking of whether one might be available out of clothing, he was looking keenly into the series of notch steps and finger holes I had made, as if counting them and fixing each position in his mind. And then suddenly up he came in a springing rush, hooking his paws into the step and notches so quickly that I could not see how it was done, and he whizzed past my head and safe at last. And now came the scene. Oh, well done, little boy, brave boy. I cried, and I tried to catch and caress him, but he would not be caught. Never before had I seen anything like such a passionate revulsion from the depths of despair to the exultant joy and uncontrollable joy. He flashed and darted hither and thither as if fairly demented, screaming and shouting and twirling around and round in giddy loops and circles like a leaf in a whirlwind, lying down and rolling over sideways, head over heels, and pouring forth a tumultuous flood of historical cries and sobs, gaspings and mutterings. When I ran up to him to shake him, fearing he might die of joy, he flashed off 200 yards, his feet in a mist of motion, and then suddenly came back in a wild rush and launched himself at my face, almost knocking me down. And all the time he was screeching and screaming and shouting, "Save, save, save." And then away again, dropping suddenly at times with his feet in the air, trembling and fairly sobbing. Such passionate emotion was enough to kill him. Moses' stately song of triumph after escaping the Egyptians and the Red Sea was nothing to it. Who could have guessed the capacity of this dull, enduring little fellow for all that stores this mortal frame? Nobody could have helped trying with him, but there is nothing like work here for toning down excessive joy and fear. So I ran ahead, calling him with tough voice as I could, to come on and to stop this nonsense, for we had far to go, and it would soon be dark. Neither of us feared another trial like this. Heaven would surely count one enough for a lifetime. The ice ahead was gashed by thousands of crevices, but they were common ones. The joy of deliverance burnt in us like fire, and we ran without fatigue. Every muscle was meant to be found in glory in its strength. Mr. Keene flew across everything in his way, and not until dark did he settle to his normal fox-like trot. Thereafter, Mr. Keene was a changed dog. During the rest of the trip, instead of holding aloof, he always lay at my side and tried to keep me constantly in sight, and would hardly accept a morsel of food, however tempting, from anybody's hand but mine. At night, when all was quiet about the campfire, he would come to me and rest his head on my knee with a look of devotion as if I were his God. And often as he caught my eye, he seemed to be trying to say, "Wasn't that an awful time we had together on the glacier?"
Rita.
That's an Irish bar there, the underground hideout of the DAR there. Something inside of me said, "Watch your heart, mademoiselle," and it might be just as well to watch your purse in grouse pie. We danced in a trance, and I dreamed of romance, till the strings of my heart seemed to be knotted, and even the palms seemed to be parted. The cross-winding eve was casting its spell, and I was drunk with love and cheap muscatel. We went to the lake shore. There's a pretty park there, and as I remember, it was pretty dark there. There in this exotic locale by a silver lagoon, underneath a full moon, he fell asleep in grouse pine. And that is my
I'll volunteer.
A lot of acts.
All right.
House, I'm Teresa's husband. Great to be here at this family reunion. I'm not going to sing or dance, but just share a little something with you. Ever since I got to the reunion here, I've been having these bizarre dreams every night, so I thought I'd share a couple of them with you. The other night I was dreaming, I guess it had something to do with being Detroit, the automobile capital of the world or something. I don't know what it was, but I dreamed I was at the DeMaggio family reunion, and all of a sudden the world came to an end. So when I got to heaven, I was picturing green valleys, flowing rivers, beautiful flowers, and you know what you'd imagine. But when I got up there, it was completely different. It was a giant racetrack. So I couldn't figure that one out. So St. Peter's standing there at the entrance, and I walk up to him. I said, "Hey, this isn't exactly what I thought heaven would be like. Well, what's the deal here?" He says, "Well, when you get to heaven, everyone's assigned a certain car. Depending on how good you are, is the type of car you get." So anyway, they gave me my Maserati. And started driving around. I was looking for, thought, well, heck, the world came to an end at the family reunion. Might as well check the relatives. So started looking around, and I saw Uncle Tony and Aunt Mary go by in a long black stretch limo with a chauffeur and waved to him and everything. There was Aunt Ellie in a burgundy Porsche zipping by. I saw Aunt Mickey in a red Mercedes in front of me, and gee, there was a pretty green Jaguar. I saw Aunt Terry go by, and so anyway, I'm driving around, just looking for everybody, and all of a sudden I see my wife. She's crashed down the side of the road, had this yellow Corvette Stingray. She just totaled it, you know, and she's standing there laughing. So I pull over, and I thought for sure she'd be hurt, and I got out and said, "Are you okay?" And she's just laughing. And so I don't understand. You just got this new Corvette here, and you just totaled it, smashed it right into a tree, and you're just laughing. She goes, "You won't believe it, but I just saw my Aunt Rita go by on a skateboard." Last night, I don't know what it was, but I had another weird dream I thought I'd share with you. I dreamed I died, and I got up to heaven, and again, it wasn't exactly what I pictured. So I was looking through the green valleys and all that, and there was a giant warehouse full of clocks. St. Peter sitting at the front desk there, and I go up to him and say, "So could you explain to me what the deal is here? This isn't exactly how I pictured heaven." He says, "Well, it works like this. For every person that's still alive down on earth, they have their own personal clock on the wall somewhere in this building. And every time they sin, the minute hand goes around 1 full hour." So I said, "Okay, fair enough." So I decided, well, what the heck? I might as well look for everybody at the reunion, look for their clock. And so I started looking around. I saw my wives, and saw all the DeMaggio cousins, and saw all the aunts and uncles, and I think I got just about everybody's clock down at the entire reunion, all 90, 100 of them. The only one I couldn't find was Cousin Frank's. So I was looking around for that, and started getting kind of frustrated. I was in there a couple hours. I searched every corner of that building, went up and down. Finally, I just said, forget it. And I went back to the front desk, and I said, "Hey, I found everybody's clock, all my friends, enemies, relatives, everybody at the reunion, except Cousin Frank's." And he said, "Oh, you mean Frank Privatera?" I said, yeah, that's the one. He said, "Frank that's married to Anna." I said, "Yeah, you got it. That's the one. I can't find his clock." He says, "You mean Frank, the one that smashed Donna's windshield?" I said, "You got it, St. Peter. Where's his clock?" He says, "Well, it's like this. The good Lord keeps Frank's clock in his own personal office. He likes to use it as a fan."
Now we have an encore performance by members of the Von Clapham family. Take it away, boys. Okay. All right, this skit is called Mr. Short-Term Memory. Okay, this is in a hospital, and he has a broken leg. When did this happen? Yesterday. How? I was scraping ice off my roof and I fell. Oh. Well, come on. Up and at him. To the hospital. I can't. I broke my leg. How did this happen? I fell. That's it? That's all there is to it? I was scraping ice off my roof yesterday and I fell. Okay. Some help. Nurse! What? You know, you call me. Oh. What are you doing here? I'm taking care of people. Oh. What are you doing here, Frank? I broke my leg. And I'm Bob. What are you doing here? I broke my leg. When? How? Yesterday. I was scraping ice off my roof. Oh. Maybe I should have brought you something, you know? Like, look, who brought you these nice flowers? You did, Frank. Oh. Better get you some help fast. Nurse! Now what? This man has a broken leg. I know. Take care of it. I already did. Oh. Oh, can you excuse me a minute, Frank? Sure. Thank you. Can you pull that screen around? Oh, sure. Oh, you pig! Use the bathroom! What are you doing here? I broke my leg. How did this happen? I'll make it right to be with no matter. Oh, we should go and sue him. I can't. Why? I broke my leg. When did this happen? Last week. We need help. Bad. Nurse! What do you want? I don't know. You call me. No, I didn't. What do you want? What are you doing in bed? I'm sick. Oh. Hope you get well soon. Bye. Bye. Is there anyone here?
What do you think of this reunion so far?
Oh, there's a whole mess of people here, Pete. There's a whole mess of them.
There's some messy people here too.
We got some big ones here, some small ones, and some wide ones, and some skinny ones, and the young ones, and some old ones, and it's the blue-eyed crowd and the brown-eyed crowd, and you know, we got the people that like to pick their noses with their left fingers, and the people that like to pick their noses with their right fingers.
No, this one. This one here was a DeMaggio. My grandmother?
Hey, that's for ring toss! That's for ring toss, man! Hi, Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
You guys leaving? Katie? Yeah. Judy?